Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're taking a bit of a different kind of plunge than usual. Our source material isn't a stack of recent articles or a groundbreaking research paper,
No.
but something perhaps even more fundamental. We're looking at carefully selected entries from a classic dictionary of synonyms and antonyms.
Right. The building blocks.
Think of it as looking at the very building blocks of how we understand the world. Specifically, we're diving into a section from A to A. Starts with words like appetite and runs through awkward. Now, it might sound like just a vocabulary list, but trust me, buried within these precise definitions are incredible insights.
Absolutely.
These aren't just words, they're concepts, nuanced, distinct. They shape how we perceive and describe everything, from a gentle decline
To a malicious attack, yeah.
Exactly.
That's absolutely right. And our mission in this deep dive really is to act as your guides through this treasury of language. We're here to extract those hidden gems, the subtle distinctions between words we often just, use interchangeably.
Right, without thinking much about it.
Exactly. The specific shades of meaning that make one word perfect and another just close. This isn't about memorization. It's a shortcut, really, to becoming more well-informed. Not just about specific facts.
Like politics or science.
Right, but about the very tools you use to process and articulate any information about the world.
It's like getting a precision toolkit for your brain,
That's a great way to put it.
giving you the ability to see details you might have missed before. Why does it truly matter if a storm abates or subsides?
Good question.
What's the difference in perception between something that is apparent versus merely seeming? These dictionary entries, they hold the keys to thinking more clearly and expressing yourself with greater impact.
And understanding these nuances doesn't just improve your writing or speaking, it sharpens your ability to interpret information.
Yeah.
Whether you're reading a news report, analyzing a historical account, or just understanding a conversation. You'll start noticing how small differences in word choice can completely shift the meaning, the feeling, or even the implied truthfulness of a phrase.
Okay, so let's lean into this incredible source material. Let's unpack the surprising depth hidden right at the beginning of the alphabet, starting with appetite
Let's do it.
and exploring how words categorize everything from giving up power to describing an uncomfortable silence. Okay, let's start our exploration with words related to diminishing, yielding, or lowering status or intensity. The first group we encounter are ebbet, subside, wane, and ebb.
Right.
The dictionary tells us they all share the core meaning to die down in force or intensity. But as with all good synonyms, the devil is in the details, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And the details here are fascinating because they describe different types of dying down.
Okay.
Abate, for instance, stresses a progressive diminishing. It's not usually sudden.
Right. Progressive.
Think of waiting for the rain to abate before you leave the house. You expect it to lessen gradually over time.
Yeah, step by step.
Exactly. And the sense of a step-by-step decline is highlighted by its antonyms, rise and revive. A feeling abates, a sound abates. It's about a reduction in strength or degree that happens over a period.
So it's that gradual winding down. A storm abates, it loses its power progressively. What about subside then? How is that different from just lessening gradually?
Well, subside suggests a falling to a low level and an easing. And often it implies resolution or calmness after a disturbance.
After. Okay.
Think of floodwaters subsiding after a river crest. The peak has passed, right? And now the water is dropping to a lower, more stable level.
Or like emotions after an argument.
Perfect example. Emotions subside. The intensity decreases, settling into a calmer state. It's less about the process of reduction itself, maybe, and more about reaching that state of lower intensity or resolution following a peak or disturbance.
That makes sense. So abate is more the process. Subside is the movement towards a low point or calmness afterwards. What about wane? We hear about a waning moon, but how does that apply more broadly?
The moon is a perfect example because wane specifically adds an implication of fading or weakening.
Fading. Okay.
It suggests a loss of brightness, visibility, or significance, often leading towards eventual disappearance. Besides the literal waning moon, the dictionary gives the example of the public's waning interest in spaceflight.
Right.
This doesn't just mean the interest lessened, it suggests it's fading away, losing its vibrancy, becoming less prominent.
Yeah, like it's disappearing.
Exactly. And its antonym, wax, reinforces this idea of fading versus growing in prominence or intensity. It's about becoming weaker and less visible.
So abate is progressive lessening. Subside is settling down to a lower, calmer level after a disturbance. And wane is fading away, losing strength and prominence,
Ah,
like something slowly disappearing from view or consciousness.
you got it.
And ebb. That also sounds like a natural process, like the tide.
It does, and that's key. Ebb suggests a gradual waning, but specifically of something that commonly comes and goes.
Ah, cyclical.
Exactly. The most classic example, and where the word originates, is the tide ebbing out. It's a predictable, often cyclical reduction in force or quantity, part of a natural rhythm. The dictionary also offers vitality often ebbs with illnesses. That suggests a recurring pattern where energy levels decrease, implying they might also flow the antonym back later.
Right, part of cycle.
It's about a recurring pattern of decrease within a cycle.
This is already so insightful. Just knowing these subtle differences drastically changes the picture.
Yeah.
You wouldn't describe public interest in something as subsiding if it's just fading.
No, you'd use waning.
Right, and you'd never say the tide waned, you'd say it ebbed,
Right.
because it follows that specific cyclical pattern. Choosing the right word paints a far more accurate and evocative picture of this specific kind of decrease.
Precisely. It's about identifying the underlying mechanism or the nature of the diminishing process. Now let's shift gears slightly, but stay with the theme of giving things up, though this time more actively or formally.
Okay.
We have abandon, desert, and forsake. They all mean to give up completely.
Okay, give up completely. How does abandon fit into that? It sounds final.
It is. Abandon suggests complete disinterest in the future of what's given up. The person doing the abandoning just washes their hands of it entirely. No concern for what happens next.
Wow.
The dictionary's example, abandoning a cat at the end of the summer, is pretty stark.
Yeah, it is.
It highlights the indifference towards the abandoned subject's fate. And the antonym reclaim emphasizes this. If you cared, you might try to get it back, right?
Yes. The lack of concern is definitely key. It's a release of responsibility driven by indifference. How about desert, then? That feels different.
It is different. Desert, on the other hand, implies breaking a relationship, often one of occupancy, guardianship, or duty.
Ah, a relationship.
Yeah. When soldiers desert their posts, they break their bond and duty to their unit.
Right.
When people leave deserted farms, they've abandoned a place they occupied and had a relationship with. It can suggest not just emptiness, but also a sense of culpability or betrayal because a connection or responsibility was broken.
Like breaking a promise.
Kind of. The antonyms cleave to and stick to really underscore that it's about the breaking of a tie.
Ah, so deserting is specifically breaking a bond, a duty, or a connection you had. It's tied to roles or relationships. And forsake. That sounds even stronger, maybe more personal.
It often is. Forsake implies breaking a close association, often by repudiation or renunciation. This frequently applies to deeply personal bonds, like she forsook her husband for a career.
Oh, wow.
It carries a strong sense of leaving something or someone fundamental to oneself, often through a deliberate act of rejection or giving up that connection. Its antonyms, return to and revert to, highlight that it's leaving something deeply connected to one's identity or past life.
That distinction is powerful. So abandon is indifference and letting go of concern. Desert is breaking a relationship or duty, leaving a position or person you had a tie to. Forsake is breaking a close personal bond, often with a sense of renunciation. Understanding these allows you to capture the emotional or moral weight attached to the act of giving something up. It's the difference between abandoning a broken toy, deserting a military post, and forsaking a vow. Huge difference.
Huge difference. These words carve out distinct areas of meaning around the general idea of giving up, specifying the nature of the thing given up and the implied motive or consequence. Let's look at another group dealing with lessening, but this time, lessening dignity or status.
Yeah.
Abase, demean, debase, degrade, humble, humiliate. They all mean to lessen in dignity or status.
That's a challenging concept to capture precisely. Let's start with abase. Sounds a bit archaic.
It can feel that way, but it's useful. Abase suggests losing or voluntarily yielding dignity or prestige. It can be self-inflicted, like the dictionary example. A fine stage actor who abased himself by turning to television. It implies he chose a path perceived as below his artistic standing. Or it can be forced by circumstance, but it's about a reduction in perceived worth or status, often with a sense of being brought low. The antonyms exalt and extol are illuminating. They're the opposite actions of raising someone up or praising them highly.
So a lowering of oneself, whether chosen or forced by circumstance. What about demean? That feels more common.
It is. Demean suggests unsuitable behavior or association as the cause of the loss of status.
Ah, the cause.
Yes. The dictionary's example, commercial endorsements demean the Olympics, means the association with commerce lowers the perceived dignity of the Games. The loss of standing comes from actions or connections considered inappropriate or beneath one's or something standing. It's about behavior diminishing standing in the eyes of others.
So with demean, the actions or associations themselves cause the loss of status.
Yeah.
Got it. What about debase? That sounds like base, like low quality.
Exactly. Debase emphasizes loss of worth or quality. The most literal example is debase a currency, reducing its intrinsic value. But crucially, the dictionary specifies that it especially emphasizes the deterioration of moral standards. Like, drunkenness has debased the Mardi Gras.
Okay, so moral specifically.
Yeah, this isn't just about status. It's about a corruption or loss of inherent value, particularly moral or ethical quality. It points to a corruption of the essence.
That's a key distinction.
Yeah.
So abase, voluntary yield to dignity. Demean, unsuitable behavior causing status loss. Debase, loss of quality, especially moral.
Yeah.
How does degrade fit in? It sounds harsher.
It often is. Degrade suggests a downward step, often in ethical stature, and typically implies a shameful or corrupt end.
Shameful, corrupt, okay.
The public altercation degraded both candidates. It implies the fight itself was a shameful act that lowered their ethical standing in a way that felt like a corrupting step down. Its antonym, uplift, reinforces this strong negative direction. It's a more severe, often public or ethical fall from grace, suggesting a descent towards something corrupt or shameful.
So degrade implies a shameful, corrupting downward step. And humble, that can sometimes be seen as positive, right? Like being humble.
It can, but in this context, humble frequently replaces degrade when the disgrace of a reduction in status is emphasized.
Ah, the disgrace.
Yeah. They were delighted to see the bully humbled by a boy half his size. The focus is on the feeling of being brought low, often through defeat or exposure, and the public disgrace associated with that reduction in power or status. It's about that specific feeling of having one's pride broken by being brought low.
It focuses on the feeling of disgrace associated with being brought down.
Okay.
And humiliate. That sounds purely negative.
It is. Humiliate implies the severe wounding of one's pride and the causing of deep shame. Humiliated by his suggestive remarks points to the intense emotional impact, the profound personal shame and wounded pride inflicted by another's actions or circumstances. It's the most emotionally intense of this group, focusing on the deep personal pain caused by the loss of dignity.
What an incredible spectrum. We moved from a chosen lowering a base to behavior causing loss of status, demean, to loss of quality morals, debase. A shameful step down towards corruption, degrade, the disgrace of being brought low, humble, and finally the intense emotional pain of shaming, humiliating.
It's quite a range.
Knowing these differences allows you to capture not just that someone's dignity was lessened, but the specific cause and effect, the implied feeling or moral judgment.
Exactly. It's the difference between someone abasing themselves by taking a job below their pay grade, a scandal demeaning an institution, corruption debasing a society, a public mistake degrading a reputation, being defeated, humbling an arrogant person, and being ridiculed, humiliating someone. The precise one matters for understanding the scenario.
It really does. Let's stay with giving things up, but specifically in a formal or definite way.
Yeah.
Abdicate, renounce, and resign. They all mean to give up formally or definitely.
Right. Abdicate is perhaps the most specific initially. It implies giving up sovereign power.
Like kings and queens.
Exactly. The king was forced to abdicate. That's the traditional tie, monarchs or supreme rulers. However, the dictionary notes it can sometimes extend to evading parental responsibility.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, like by walking out, he abdicated his rights as a father. It applies the idea to a fundamental, almost inherent position of responsibility. Its antonyms are assume, taking on, and usurp, taking illegally. It's about formally giving up a position of supreme power or fundamental duty.
So, tied to positions of supreme power or core foundational responsibility, how does renounce compare?
Renounce may be chosen when the sacrifice, especially to some higher or moral end, is stressed.
Sacrifice, okay.
The king renounced his throne to attain peace. Here, giving up the throne is framed as a selfless act for a greater good or principle. It can also mean to disclaim or disown, like willing to renounce his lifelong friends. The act of giving up is often seen through the lens of sacrifice or public disavowal. Its antonyms arrogate, claiming for oneself, and covet, desiring, highlight the selflessness implied by renounce versus the grasping nature of the antonyms.
So abdicate is giving up the top spot or a core duty, often under pressure or by choice, while renounce is more about a sacrifice or a public disavowal, often with a moral dimension. And resign, that's the everyday one, isn't it?
It is. Resign applies especially to giving up an unexpired office or trust. Forced to resign from office. This is the most common term for formally leaving a position of employment, leadership, or elected office before the natural end of the term. It focuses specifically on the formal act of departure from a defined role or job.
That clarifies the context nicely. We see kings abdicate or sometimes renounce their thrones, and politicians or executives resign from office. The formality and context of the position being given up are key here.
Absolutely. These words distinguish the different scenarios and motivations behind formally stepping away from a position or claim. Now let's look at a related set. Abjure, renounce, forswear, recant, retract. These mean to withdraw one's word or professed belief.
Okay, we just discussed renounce in the context of sacrifice or disowning. How does it function here with withdrawing a belief?
Here, renounce is similar to abjure in meaning to disclaim or disown, but perhaps less formal or final than abjure. It's about publicly declaring you no longer stand by a belief, an association, or even people previously connected to you, like willing to renounce his lifelong friends. It's a public disavowal.
A public statement of no longer supporting something. What about abjure itself then?
Abjure implies a firm and final rejecting or abandoning under oath.
Under oath. Serious.
Very. Think of someone forced to abjure allegiance to a foreign power when becoming a citizen. It's a formal, often solemn declaration to give up a loyalty, right, or belief, frequently accompanied by an oath or vow that makes it binding and final. Its antonyms, pledge, and elect show the contrast with making a commitment.
So abjure is a sworn final rejection, often of a formal loyalty or belief. What about forswear? That sounds maybe negative, like perjury.
It often does carry a negative connotation, you're right. Forswear may add to abjure an implication of perjury or betrayal.
Ah, betrayal.
Yes. Cannot forswear my principles to win votes implies a resistance to betraying one's deeply held beliefs, which feels like breaking a personal vow or being disloyal. It can also mean to swear falsely or to solemnly promise not to do something, but the dictionary emphasizes the implication of breaking a vow or being disloyal to a principle.
Oh, that's strong. It implies breaking a vow or betraying a principle you committed to. What about recant?
Recant stresses the withdrawing or denying of something professed or taught.
Taking back something you said.
Exactly. This is specifically about taking back a statement, an opinion, or a belief that you've previously stated, taught, or confessed publicly. The suspect recanted his confession and professed his innocence. The focus is on retracting a previous verbal or written assertion.
Taking back something you said or claimed. And retract. How's it different from recant?
Retract applies specifically to the withdrawing of a promise, an offer, or an accusation.
Ah, specific types of statements.
Yes. Under threat of lawsuit, the paper retracted the statement. This is about pulling back a specific declaration, a proposal, or a charge, often due to pressure, new evidence, or an error being acknowledged. It's more about pulling back a specific claim or offer.
Okay.
Thinking about these distinctions helps you parse historical documents, legal texts, or even political rhetoric. Someone might abjure a political party that's a formal breaking of loyalty.
Right.
They might recant a controversial statement they made, taking back something specific they said, or retract an offer they made, pulling back a specific proposition. Renouncing a belief feels different from forswearing a vow to uphold that belief.
This is incredibly useful. It shows that withdrawing words or beliefs isn't a single act, but one with many facets depending on the nature of what's being withdrawn and the circumstances. It highlights the dictionary's role in mapping the landscape of meaning around complex human actions.
Precisely. These words delineate specific types of withdrawal, each with its own context and implication.
Let's shift to words about strong dislike, intense negativity directed towards a person or thing. Abomination, anathema, bugbear, bête noire, they all mean a person or thing that arouses intense dislike.
Right, strong stuff here. Abomination suggests the arousal of loathing, disgust, and extreme displeasure.
Loathing and disgust. Visceral.
Very. In her opinion, all of modern art is an abomination. It hits hard on visceral revulsion and profound disapproval, something deeply offensive to one's senses, morals, or values. It's something you find utterly detestable.
That feels very gut reaction, a strong revulsion.
It does. Now, anathema suggests something so odious that it is dismissed or rejected out of hand.
Project out of hand, like immediately.
Yeah. Anything that was Yankee was anathema to my southern aunt. It implies a strong, often principled, condemnation and rejection, almost like a formal curse or banishment of the idea or thing. You don't just dislike it, you declare it utterly opposed to everything you stand for and refuse to engage with it.
A forceful turning away, a declaration of utter opposition or exclusion. Bugbear. That sounds almost cute.
Huh, maybe the sound, but not the meaning. Bugbear suggests something so dreaded that one seeks continually to avoid it.
Dreaded and avoided.
Exactly. The deficit became an annual congressional bugbear. It's a source of persistent worry, fear, or annoyance that you constantly anticipate and try to sidestep or escape dealing with. The dislike is intertwined with a sense of dread and the desire for avoidance.
That's interesting. Linking intense dislike specifically to dread and avoidance. It's a thing that worries you and you try to steer clear of.
Yes, the source of dislike is also a source of anxiety that drives behavior. Now, bête noire suggests a pet aversion that one habitually or especially avoids.
A pet aversion, like a pet peeve, but stronger.
Stronger, yeah.
There.
His mooching brother-in-law was the bête noire of his life. This is a more personal, perhaps less rational, deep-seated dislike. It's your particular nemesis, the thing or person that especially gets under your skin and that you make a point of avoiding.
A very specific personal object of strong annoyance or dislike. So, intense loathing and disgust, abomination, outright condemnation and rejection, anathema, a dreaded source of avoidance, bugbear, and a personal, often habitual object of avoidance, bête noire. Each word describes intense dislike, but with a distinct flavor, highlighting different aspects of the emotional or behavioral response it evokes.
Exactly. They move from a general feeling of revulsion to specific types of avoidance or rejection based on the nature of the dislike and its personal impact. Now let's look at ways of expressing that dislike or condemnation vehemently.
Ah, the words for nasty talk.
Pretty much. Abuse, vituperation, invective, obloquy, scurrility, billingsgate. They mean vehemently expressed condemnation or disapproval.
Okay, abuse seems like the most common. The dictionary says it implies the anger of the speaker and stresses the harshness of the language, charging a husband with verbal abuse. That's a general term.
Yeah, that's the baseline angry, harsh words. Its antonym is adulation, which is interesting.
Right. What about vituperation? Sounds more elaborate.
Yeah. It implies fluent and sustained abuse, like subjected his aid to a torrent of vituperation. Antonyms acclaim, praise. This isn't just an isolated harsh word, but a continuous stream, a prolonged verbal assault.
A torrent. It emphasizes the flow, volume, and persistence of the abuse. Invective.
Invective implies comparable vehemence, but suggests greater verbal and rhetorical skill and may apply to a public denunciation.
Skill. Like they're good at being nasty.
Huh, yeah, sort of. A politician known for his blistering invective. This is crafted, potentially eloquent, harsh criticism or denunciation, often delivered publicly, maybe in a speech or writing. It's skilled, often formal, harsh language.
So more crafted and potentially public than just simple abuse or a torrent. It has a sense of performance or deliberate construction.
Okay, obloquy.
Obloquy suggests defamation and consequent shame and disgrace. Silently endured the obloquy of his former friend. This is different because the focus isn't just on the language itself.
That's the result.
Exactly. It's condemnation expressed so strongly that it leads to public shame, disgrace, and loss of reputation for the target. That's a crucial distinction. The language causes public disgrace. Scurrility. Sounds like scurrilous.
It does. Scurrility implies viciousness of attack and coarseness or foulness of language, a debate that was not an exchange of ideas but an exercise in scurrility. This gets into the vulgarity, nastiness, and sheer unpleasantness of the words used. It's low, coarse, and vicious language used in an attack.
Just plain, nasty, vulgar language. And Billingsgate. That sounds very specific, maybe historical. I think you mentioned that.
It is. Billingsgate implies practiced fluency and variety of profane or obscene abuse.
Practiced fluency, like they've rehearsed their insults.
Almost. A Billingsgate that would make a drunken sailor blush. The dictionary's example paints a vivid picture. It's expert-level, highly skilled, vulgar, and offensive language. It suggests a deep repertoire of insults and profanity used fluently, often with a sense of being a practiced art form of vulgarity.
Wow. From general harshness, abuse, to sustained torrents, vituperation, skilled public attacks, invective, language causing disgrace, obloquy, coarse nastiness, scurrility, to practiced fluent obscenity, Billingsgate. This gives you such a detailed way to describe negative, condemnatory language.
It really does. It's not just about being angry, but how that anger is expressed and its potential impact. From a simple insult to a reputation-destroying tirade or Wow, a cascade of creative profanity.
It really allows you to pinpoint the precise nature of the verbal attack you're witnessing or describing.
Absolutely. They capture different levels of skill, intent, and consequence in verbal condemnation.
Let's move to words about taking or claiming something, often with questionable rights. Appropriate, preempt, arrogate, usurp, confiscate. They mean to seize high-handedly.
Right. Appropriate suggests making something one's own or converting to one's own use without authority or with questionable right.
Like taking office supplies.
Could be. Or just appropriated the tools meant to be shared by all. It's about taking something that isn't rightfully or exclusively yours. Essentially, taking possession or control for personal use when you shouldn't.
Like taking credit for someone else's idea, or taking resources that belong to a group. It's a taking without clear, legitimate claim.
Exactly. Now, preempt implies beforehandedness in taking something desired or needed by others.
Getting there first.
Yeah. News of the crisis preempted much of the regular programming. It's about getting there first, taking something that others wanted, expected, or needed, thereby preventing them from having it. You take the spot, the resource, or the opportunity before anyone else can.
Like cutting in line, but for things like resources, time slots, or opportunities. Taking something by getting there first.
Right. Arrogant implies insolence, presumption, and exclusion of others in seizing rights, powers, or functions.
Insolence and presumption sounds arrogant.
It is. White House staffers arrogated powers belonging to cabinet members. The antonyms renounce, yield help show the contrast. This highlights the arrogant and presumptuous nature of the taking, often exceeding one's legitimate authority or stepping into a role they aren't entitled to, often shutting others out. It's about overstepping bounds aggressively and with an attitude of entitlement.
So arrogant is taking powers you aren't entitled to with the sense of presumption and excluding others who might have a rightful claim.
Yes. Now, usurp implies unlawful or unwarranted intrusion into the place or rights of another, especially by force.
Unlawful intrusion, like taking the throne.
That's the classic example. Or, her new stepmother had usurped her place in the household. The antonym abdicate fits here. This is specifically about taking someone else's rightful position, role, or authority, often through illegitimate means, force, or manipulation. It implies a clear sense of injustice because a rightful owner has been displaced by someone who took their place illegitimately.
That carries a strong sense of illegitimacy and injustice. Someone took a place that wasn't theirs to take.
It does. And finally, confiscate always implies seizure through exercise of authority.
Official taking.
Yes. Customs officers confiscate all contraband. This is a legal or official taking, usually by a governing body or authorized personnel. It's a taking that is sanctioned by law or rule, unlike the others which imply questionable, absent, or illegitimate authority.
So confiscate is the only one that requires official legitimate power behind the taking. So taking without authority, or questionably appropriate, taking something before others can preempt, arrogantly taking powers beyond one's right, arrogate, unlawfully taking a position or right, usurp, and officially seizing under authority, confiscate. Each word tells a different story about the act of taking, highlighting the method, the rightfulness, and the context.
They show a spectrum from informal, questionable taking to formal, authorized seizure with varying degrees of presumption, illegitimacy, and force in between. Understanding these helps analyze actions of individuals, groups, or even governments.
This next group is particularly relevant to critical thinking and understanding communication words about putting on a false appearance or describing things that aren't what they seem.
Oh yeah, this is a good one.
Assume, affect, pretend, simulate, feign, counterfeit, sham. They mean to put on a false or deceptive appearance.
Right. Assume is interesting here because it often implies a justifiable motive rather than an intent to deceive.
Justifiable, like faking it for a good reason.
Sometimes assumed an air of cheerfulness for the sake of the patient. The false appearance isn't necessarily to trick someone for personal gain, but perhaps for a benevolent reason, out of necessity, or simply to create a certain atmosphere without necessarily claiming it as genuine.
Okay, so maybe faking for a good reason, or at least not a malicious one. What about affect? Like affecting an accent.
Exactly. Affect implies making a false show of possessing, using, or feeling something, usually for effect, willing to affect an interest in art in order to impress her. It's about performing a quality, feeling, or interest that you don't genuinely have, specifically to create a desired impression on others. It's a performance put on for an audience.
Like putting on airs or faking sophistication or knowledge about something to impress people.
Exactly. It's a performance designed to influence perception. Pretend implies an overt and sustained false profession of what is.
Overt and sustained, like keeping up a lie.
Yeah, pretended not to know about her husband's affair. This is a more direct, explicit, and continued act of misrepresenting facts or beliefs. You are actively and continuously claiming something false is true or that you don't know something you do know.
A prolonged act of not being truthful about something specific, maintaining a false reality through explicit claims. Simulate, like in simulations.
Precisely. Simulate suggests an assumption of the characteristics of something else by a close imitation. The training chamber simulates a weightless atmosphere. This is about creating a functional or appearance-based copy of something else's properties, often for training, testing, or experimental purposes. It's about imitation of qualities, often physical or functional.
Making something seem or function like the real thing, usually physically or functionally, through imitation.
Yes. Feign implies more artful invention than pretend, less specific imitation than simulate.
More artful.
Cleverer.
Maybe. Feign sickness in order to stay home from school. It's a more crafted, often clever or imaginative act of faking, typically involving a specific condition or emotion. It feels a bit more deliberate and perhaps skilled than simple pretending.
So a deliberate, slightly clever fake, often specific, maybe using a bit of imagination. Counterfeit, that's straightforward, right? Like fake money.
It is, but the definition highlights why. Counterfeit implies imitation that achieves an extremely high degree of verisimilitude.
Verisimilitude, looking very real. Exactly. Counterfeited drunkenness so perfectly that many forgot he was acting. This is about creating a highly convincing, nearly perfect copy, specifically intended to deceive thoroughly and pass for the real thing without detection.
Like counterfeit money, it's meant to be an indistinguishable copy to fool everyone.
Precisely. The goal is undetectable imitation to deceive. Now, sham stresses an obvious intent to deceive with falseness that fools only the gullible.
Bad fake.
Pretty much. Shammed a most unconvincing limp. This is a less successful, perhaps even clumsy or transparent attempt at faking that isn't hard to see through for anyone paying attention.
So from faking for potentially good reasons, assume, to faking for effect, sustained false claims, pretend, functional imitation, simulate, artful, clever faking, feign, highly convincing deception, counterfeit, to obvious, gullible, fooling, faking, sham. That's a fantastic breakdown of different levels and types of putting on a false appearance.
It shows the many ways appearance can diverge from reality, from subtle performances to clumsy attempts at fooling others. Now let's look at words describing things that appear to be one way but aren't necessarily that way upon closer inspection.
Right.
These are about the nature of appearance itself. Apparent, illusory, seeming, ostensible. They mean not actually being what appearance indicates.
Okay, so things that look a certain way but might be misleading. Apparent.
Apparent suggests appearance to unaided senses that is not or may not be proven by more rigorous examination or greater knowledge. The apparent cause of the train wreck. Antonym real.
So what it looks like at first glance.
Exactly. It's what looks true on the surface, the initial perception based on readily available information, but it's open to being disproven or changed upon closer inspection or with more facts.
It's the surface truth, which might not hold up under scrutiny. Illusory, like an illusion.
Just like that. Illusory implies a false impression based on deceptive resemblance or faulty observation, or influenced by emotions that prevent a clear view.
Emotions getting in the way.
Yeah, like the illusory happiness of a new infatuation. Antonyms, factual, matter of fact. This is about an impression that actively deceives, because it's based on a trick of resemblance, flawed perception, like a mirage, or a subjective emotional distortion that prevents you from seeing clearly.
So not just potentially wrong, but actively misleading or based on feeling rather than fact. It creates a false sense of reality. Seeming, how's that different?
Seeming implies a character in the thing observed that gives it the appearance, sometimes through intent, of something else. The seeming simplicity of the story.
So the thing itself looks simple.
Yes. The emphasis is on the quality of the thing itself that creates the appearance. It seems simple because something about its nature, structure, or presentation makes it appear that way, whether that quality is natural or intentionally designed to create that impression.
The appearance is inherent to the thing itself, or perhaps intentionally crafted. It seems that way because of how it is presented or its inherent qualities.
Yes. And finally, ostensible suggests a discrepancy between an openly declared or logically implied aim or reason and the true one.
The stated reason versus the real reason.
Exactly. Business was the ostensible reason for their visit. This is about a stated reason, purpose, or motive that is presented publicly, but it is not the real underlying reason.
The excuse.
Hmm.
The reason they tell you, which isn't the actual reason. A stated purpose that hides the true motive.
Exactly. So what looks true but might not be apparent, an actively misleading impression, illusory, an inherent quality creating an appearance, seeming, and a stated reason hiding the real one, ostensible. These are incredibly useful tools for critical thinking,
Oh, definitely.
helping you discern between what is presented and what is real, especially when analyzing arguments, claims, or stated motivations in any context.
This section alone provides such valuable tools for analyzing information and communication.
Indeed. They help us look beyond the surface.
Let's shift gears again and look at words around conflict and aggressive action. Starting with attack as a noun, the dictionary gives us two main senses. The first group, attack, assault, onslaught, onset, mean an attempt to injure, destroy, or defame.
Right. In this sense, attack is the general term for initiating hostile action aimed at harming someone or something. It suggests animosity, but allows for other motives like cruelty or criticism.
Okay, the general term.
But assault implies more violence and malice or viciousness, often with specific legal or military connotations and often inflicting greater damage than a mere attack.
So assault is a more intense, harmful, and potentially violent version of attack, often with specific legal or military weight.
Yes, higher stakes and potentially greater harm. Onslaught suggests a vigorous, destructive attempt to overwhelm by force of momentum or numbers or intensity.
Overwhelmed, like being swamped.
Exactly. Think of succumbing to the onslaught of a disease or the enemy's relentless onslaught. It's about being overwhelmed by the sheer force, intensity, or volume of the attack. It feels relentless and overpowering.
A powerful, overwhelming force that's hard to resist. It's the feeling of being swamped by the attack. And onset.
Onset applies to both the initial attack and any successive renewal of vigor in the attack. Troops preparing for a fresh onset from the enemy. It marks the beginning of aggressive action or a renewed period of intense attack after a lull. It signals the start or resumption of hostile action.
Okay, so that's attempts to injure or destroy. The second sense is attack, aggression, offense, offensive, meaning action in a struggle for supremacy. This feels more strategic, like in sports or war.
Exactly. Here, attack implies the initiation of action, often sudden and violent, within a competitive struggle. A sustained running attack resulting in an early touchdown. It's about going first, taking the initiative in a struggle to gain an advantage or supremacy.
Getting things started in a competitive context, taking the initiative. Aggression. That sounds like the motive.
Often it is. Aggression stresses a lack of provocation and a desire for conquest or domination, chiefly military, pledged never to fight a war of aggression. Antonym resistance. It's about unprovoked action motivated by a desire to expand, control, or dominate others. It's the underlying motive of expansionism, domination, or hostile expansion.
So aggression is often the motive or character of the attack, especially when thinking about expansion or domination.
Often, yes. Offense characterizes the position or methods of the attackers with specific reference to their desire for supremacy, when on the offense to gain as much ground as possible. It's the general strategy, posture, or approach taken by the side that is attacking in a struggle. It's being in the active role of trying to advance or dominate.
Being on the offensive, actively seeking to advance or gain ground.
Yes. An offensive implies vigorously aggressive action, especially in war, or denotes a particular episode marked by such action. Launched an economic offensive to stave off a recession. It's a specific, strong, and often large-scale period of aggressive action aimed at achieving supremacy, whether in military, economic, or other struggles. It's a defined period of intense offensive action.
So different layers here from attempts to injure, including assault, onslaught, onset, to actions in a struggle for supremacy, including aggression, offense, offensive. Now let's look at the verb forms. Attack, assault, assail, bombard, storm. They mean to make a more or less violent onset upon.
Right. Verb attack is the most general, implying aggressively taking the initiative. You can attack a problem or attack the enemy lines. It's the basic verb for initiating action against something perceived as an obstacle or enemy.
What about assail?
Assail implies attempting to conquer or break down resistance by repeated blows or shots. Assailed the enemy with artillery fire or assailed him with questions. This suggests a sustained, repeated action against resistance, aimed at weakening or overcoming it through continuous pressure or impact.
Like wearing something down through continuous action or impact. And the verb assault, similar to the noun.
Very similar focus. Verb assault suggests a direct attempt to overpower by suddenness and violence of onslaught in a direct confrontation. Commando troops assaulted the building from all sides. This is a sudden, violent, and face-to-face attempt to overwhelm an enemy position or target, often by storming it directly.
Quick, forceful, and direct action, often against a specific point or objective in close quarters. Bombard. Sounds like bomb.
Exactly. Bombard applies to attacking continuously and devastatingly with bombs or shells. Bombarded the city nightly. This is a specific, heavy, and continuous form of attack using projectiles, often from a distance, causing widespread damage and devastation.
Relentless, heavy attack using explosives, often from a distance. And storm, like storming the castle.
Precisely that image. Storm implies an attempt to sweep from its path every obstacle to victory. A fortress that has never been stormed. This is a forceful, overwhelming advance aimed at taking control or achieving victory by overcoming all resistance directly in its path, often involving rushing into a fortified position.
Okay.
Think about applying these verbs. You attack a new business market, take initiative. You assail someone with demands, repeated pressure. Troops assault a fortified position, sudden, violent, direct action. Artillery bombards an area, continuous heavy fire. Soldiers storm a hill, forceful advance over resistance. The dictionary helps us select the exact verb to describe the type of aggressive action.
This level of detail is crucial for understanding military history, strategic analysis, or even just describing a forceful argument. It's so much more nuanced than just saying, they attacked.
It really is.
Let's move on to words about going along with someone. Accompany, attend, escort, they mean to go along with. Simple enough, right?
Seems simple, but again, nuances. Accompany, when referring to persons, usually implies equality of status. Accompanied his wife to the theater. It's the most general term and suggests simply going together as peers without a hierarchical relationship or specific protective ceremonial purpose beyond mutual presence.
Straightforward. Just going together on equal footing. Attend, like attending a queen.
Exactly that sort of context. Attend implies a waiting upon in order to serve, usually as a subordinate. We'll attend the president at the summit meeting. This implies a difference in status and a service role you are going with someone specifically to serve them, assist them, or be present at their command.
So attending implies service or subordinate status.
Yes. Escort adds implications of protection, ceremony, or courtesy. A motorcade escorted the visiting queen. The purpose is key here, providing a protective presence, fulfilling a ceremonial duty, or showing courtesy by guiding or accompanying someone important or needing protection.
Okay, accompanying equals going together. Attending, serving subordinate. Escorting, protecting formal purpose. Subtle but important differences that define the relationship and reason for going together.
They change the entire dynamic of the relationship being described and the purpose of the joint movement. Let's look at some words describing connections, specifically a sticking to or together, adherence, adhesion.
This seems like a simple distinction. Adherence suggests a mental or moral attachment, like adherence to the principles of reform.
Yeah.
Antonym, non-adherence. Sticking to ideas.
Yes, it's about sticking to abstract concepts, beliefs, or even people out of loyalty or conviction. It's a metaphorical sticking. Adhesion implies a physical attachment.
Like glue.
Exactly, the adhesion of paint to a surface.
Simple but clear. Mental, moral versus physical sticking. One you measure with conviction or loyalty, the other with physical force.
Exactly, and this distinction is vital in many fields. Scientists study adhesion in materials, while sociologists might study adherence to cultural norms. Finally, in this section, spatial relationships, words meaning being in close proximity.
Lots of ways to say next to.
There are. Adjacent, adjoining, contiguous, abutting, tangent, conterminous, juxtaposed.
That's a lot. Let's break them down. Adjacent.
Adjacent may or may not imply contact, but always implies absence of anything of the same kind in between. The price of the house and the adjacent garage, antonym, non-adjacent, they are next to each other, close. And nothing similar, like another house or garage, is between them, but they don't necessarily have to touch.
Yes, spatially close and without a similar separator, but not necessarily touching. Adjoining. Sounds like they touch.
They do. Adjoining definitely implies meeting and touching at some point or line. Assigned, adjoining rooms at the hotel. Antonyms, detached, disjoined. This is about direct physical contact, sharing a boundary or a wall.
Rooms side by side, sharing a wall. Or properties that touch along a border.
Correct. Contiguous implies having contact on all or most of one side. Offices in all 48 contiguous states. This suggests a shared border that is substantial, not just touching at a single point or corner. It's about sharing an extensive boundary.
Like states sharing long borders, or buildings that share a long common wall. Abutting.
Abutting stresses the termination of one thing along a line of contact with another. Land abutting on the road. This is about one thing ending right where another begins, specifically along a shared line or boundary. It emphasizes the meeting point where one thing stops and the other starts.
Like property lines meeting a road, or two structures meeting precisely at a boundary line. Tangent, that's math, right?
Often, yes. Tangent implies contact at a single point. A line tangent to a curve. This is primarily a geometrical term, where a line or curve touches another curve or surface at just one point without crossing it.
Very precise. Contact at just a singular point, like a line touching a circle's edge. Conterminous. Never heard that one.
It's less common. Conterminous applies to objects bordering on each other, like crossing the conterminous border of France and Germany.
Okay, sharing a border.
Or having the same bounds, limits, or ends, like the several conterminous civil and ecclesiastical parishes of England. This is about shared boundaries, either adjacent borders, like countries, or exactly the same boundaries, like two administrative areas covering the exact same geographical territory.
Sharing a border or having the exact same limits or boundaries. Got it.
Exactly. And finally, juxtaposed means placed side by side, espir, so as to permit comparison and contrast. An ultramodern office building juxtaposed to a Gothic church.
Oh. This one is less about physical necessity of contact and more about intentional placement for effect. Placing things next to each other deliberately to highlight their differences or similarities,
All right.
creating a dynamic relationship through proximity for conceptual impact.
Yes, often used in art, architecture, literature, or analysis to draw attention to contrast or comparison. These spatial words show incredible precision, moving from simple closeness to direct contact, shared borders, singular points of contact, shared limits, and intentional placement for conceptual effect. They allow us to be incredibly specific about how things relate spatially or even conceptually through proximity.
What a detailed way to describe how things relate spatially. It's far beyond just next to.
Indeed, they capture distinct types of spatial relationships.
Let's turn now to words about character and disposition, specifically those implying a desire to please or a general pleasantness. Amiable, good-natured, obliging, complacent. They mean having the desire or disposition to please.
Right. Amiable implies having qualities that make one liked and easy to deal with. A travel club that attracts amiable types. Antonym, unamiable. This is about general likability, a pleasant and friendly disposition that makes interaction easy and enjoyable for others.
Just generally pleasant to be around, easy to get along with, agreeable, good-natured. Sounds similar.
Similar, but good-natured implies a cheerful willingness to please or to be helpful and sometimes to permit imposition.
Permit imposition, like a pushover.
Sometimes, potentially. A good-natured boy, always willing to pitch in. Antonym, contrary. This adds willingness and helpfulness, even tolerance of being taken advantage of or inconvenienced as part of their disposition. It's more active, maybe, than just being amiable.
Willingness to help, even if it means being imposed upon a bit. Obliging.
Obliging stresses a friendly readiness to be helpful or to accommodate to the wishes of others. Our obliging innkeeper granted our request. Antonyms, disobliging, inconsiderate. This highlights active helpfulness and a readiness to adjust or go out of your way to accommodate others' requests. It implies a more proactive desire to assist or please someone with a specific need.
Ready and willing to help or adjust for you, actively accommodating requests.
Complacent. That sounds a bit like complacent.
Related, maybe, in feel. Complacent often implies passivity or a weakly amiable willingness to yield to others through a desire to please or to be agreeable.
Weakly amiable. Yeah. Complacent people who only say what others want to hear. Antonyms, contrary, perverse. This introduces a potential negative connotation, a yielding that might stem from a lack of conviction, a desire to avoid disagreement, or excessive eagerness to please rather than genuine helpfulness. It can suggest weakness or being easily swayed.
So not necessarily a good thing.
Not always, no. So we move from general likability, amiable, to cheerful willingness to help, good-natured, active readiness to accommodate, obliging, and finally a potentially weak or passive yielding driven by a need to please, complacent. Yeah. Understanding these helps us describe someone's helpfulness or desire to please with more accuracy, distinguishing genuine kindness from perhaps less admirable motivations.
Absolutely. It distinguishes genuine helpfulness from simple agreeableness or people-pleasing. Related to this, but focusing more broadly on goodwill and lack of antagonism. Amicable, neighborly, friendly.
Right. Amicable implies a state of peace and a desire on the part of the parties not to quarrel. Maintained amicable relations even after the divorce. Antonym, antagonistic. It describes a relationship free from conflict or hostility, based on a mutual desire to get along. Even if the relationship isn't necessarily close or warm, it's about maintaining peace.
Like maintaining peace, even if there are difficulties or disagreements, just agreeing not to fight. A sort of truce.
Yeah, a peaceful coexistence. Neighborly implies a disposition to live on good terms with others in necessary proximity and to be helpful and kindly on principle.
On principle, because they're neighbors.
Exactly. Prompted by neighborly concern to inquire about her health. Antonyms, unneighborly, ill-disposed. This is about positive relations specifically with those geographically close, motivated by a sense of community principle or civic duty to be kind and helpful because you are neighbors.
Acting like a good neighbor should, based on the idea of community, proximity, and mutual support. Friendly. This seems the warmest.
It usually is. Friendly stresses cordiality and often warmth or intimacy of personal relations. Sought his friendly advice on this important matter. Antonyms, unfriendly, belligerent. This is about warm, personal connection, potentially leading to intimacy or closeness. It's a more personal and often warmer feeling than just being amicable, peaceful coexistence, or neighborly community kindness.
So, peaceful relations and avoiding conflict, amicable, community-based kindness with those nearby, neighborly, and warm personal connection, friendly. Distinct types of positive relationships and dispositions, describing different depths and contexts of human interaction.
They capture different ways people relate positively to each other, from simply avoiding conflict to developing warm personal bonds based on shared proximity or mutual regard. Now, let's look at the opposite of ease words about lack of smoothness or grace.
The awkward squad.
Sure, exactly. Awkward, clumsy, maladroit, inept, gauche. They mean not marked by ease and smoothness as a performance or movement.
Okay, awkward is the big one. The dictionary says it's widely applicable and can suggest unhandiness, inconvenience, lack of control, embarrassment, or lack of tact. A dinner party marked by periods of awkward silence. Antonyms, handy, deft, graceful. It covers a broad range, physical or social.
It's the general feeling of unease or lack of smooth operation in a situation or action. Clumsy implies stiffness and heaviness and can connote inflexibility, unwieldiness, ponderousness, or lack of ordinary skill.
Stiffness and heaviness, like dropping things.
That, or a writer with a persistently clumsy style. Antonyms, dexterous, adroit, facile. This often relates to physical or stylistic lack of grace and ease things, or people that move or are expressed in a heavy, uncoordinated, or inelegant way.
Heavy and ungraceful, physically or in expression. Maladroit. Sounds French.
It is. Maladroit suggests a deficiency of tact and a tendency to create awkward situations. A maladroit handling of a delicate situation, antonym adroit. This is specifically about social or diplomatic clumsiness, saying or doing the wrong thing in sensitive situations, lacking skill or grace in handling people or delicate matters.
Putting your foot in your mouth, being socially or politically awkward. Inept. How is that different?
Inept often implies inappropriateness, futility, and absurdity, blaming a conviction on an inept defense attorney. Antonyms, apt, adept, able. This is about general incompetence or lack of skill leading to failure, ineffectiveness, or absurd outcomes. It's a lack of fitness or suitability for a task, resulting in poor performance.
Like just not being good at something, leading to bad results, or being completely unsuitable for a job. Gauche. Also sounds French.
Also French. Gauche implies the effects of shyness, inexperience, or ill-breeding, feeling gauche and unsophisticated at formal parties.
So this is about social awkwardness, specifically stemming from a lack of polish, social grace, or experience in formal or sophisticated settings. It's the awkwardness of someone who doesn't know the social rules.
Yes. So we have general unease, lack of smoothness, awkward. Physical, stylistic lack of grace, clumsy. Social tactlessness, maladroit. General incompetence, unsuitability, inept. And socially unpolished, unexperienced, gauche. Each word pinpoints a different source or type of awkwardness or lack of ease, helping us specify why something feels uncomfortable or unskilled.
This is fantastic for describing character flaws or social dynamics with much more precision than just awkward.
Absolutely. They provide distinct ways to characterize a lack of ease or skill in performance, movement, or social interaction.
Let's wrap up our deep dive into the A's with words about having knowledge or being sensitive to something.
Aware, cognizant, conscious, sensible, alive, awake. They all mean having knowledge of something.
Right. Aware implies vigilance in observing or alertness in drawing inferences from what is observed. Aware of a greater number of police officers out and about. Antonym,
It's
unaware.
just noticing things.
Noticing things and being able to put them together or draw conclusions from them. It's knowledge gained through observation and inference. Paying attention to your surroundings and noticing patterns. Cognizant. Sounds more formal.
It is a bit more formal. Cognizant implies possession of special or certain knowledge as from first-hand sources. As yet, not fully cognizant of all the facts. Antonym, ignorant. This suggests having specific, verified, or confirmed knowledge, often gained directly through reliable sources or thorough study. It's knowledge based on certainty or detailed information.
Knowing the verified facts, having definitive, often detailed information. Conscious, like being awake.
Similar root, but here conscious implies that one is focusing one's attention on something already perceptible to the mind or senses. Conscious that my heart was pounding away. Antonym, unconscious. This is about direct, often internal, perception and actively focusing your mind or senses on something you can perceive. It's being directly mindful of something, internal bodily sensations or external stimuli with focused attention.
Being directly mindful of something, with focused attention on what you perceive internally or externally. Sensible. This usually means practical.
It can, but here it means something different. Sensible implies direct or intuitive perception, especially of intangibles or of emotional states or qualities.
Intuitive perception.
Yes, a doctor who was sensible of the woman's deep depression. Antonym, insensible of or to. This leans towards empathy, intuition, or understanding of abstract qualities, emotions, or states that aren't necessarily concrete facts but are perceived on a deeper, less tangible level.
Understanding things on a deeper, perhaps intuitive level, especially feelings or abstract qualities that aren't easily quantifiable. Alive. How does that fit?
Alive suggests vivid awareness of or acute sensitivity to something. We were fully alive to the momentousness of the occasion. Antonym, blind too. This implies a strong, heightened sense of awareness or sensitivity, being very receptive and reactive to the importance, significance, or nature of something. It's a lively, intense awareness.
Very sensitive and reactive. Acutely perceiving the importance or nature of something. Awake. Back to consciousness.
Close. Awake implies that one has become alive to something and is on the alert. A country not awake to the dangers of persistent inflation.
Become aware.
Yeah.
Waking up to a problem.
Exactly. This suggests a recent realization or awakening to something important or previously unnoticed, and a resulting state of alertness and readiness to act based on that new awareness.
Okay.
Yes. So noticing and inferring from observation, aware, having specific knowledge, cognizant, focusing attention on what's perceptible, conscious, intuitive perception of intangible emotions, sensible, vivid awareness, acute sensitivity, alive, and becoming alert after a realization, awake. This progression shows different ways we come to know, perceive, and respond to the world around and within us, from simple observation to deep sensitivity and a call to action.
It moves from simple observation to deep understanding and even a state of readiness based on new knowledge.
Exactly. Each word captures a distinct mode of knowing or perceiving, adding layers to how we describe understanding.
Well, that was quite a deep dive into just the very beginning of the alphabet. We didn't just list words. We really explored the subtle mechanics of giving up.
Yeah.
The very textures of dislike, the specific dynamics of taking, the many shades of putting on a false appearance.
All those ways of faking it.
Right. The precise actions in conflict, the nuances of going along with someone, the different ways things connect spatially, the spectrum of pleasant disposition, the distinct types of awkwardness, and the many modes of knowing and perceiving. It's a lot.
It is a lot. And we saw how words like juxtaposed aren't just about physical placement, but about creating meaning through contrast.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Or how Billingsgate gives a very specific kind of vulgar flavor to the idea of abuse, distinct from mere harshness or vituperation. Understanding these distinctions allows you to see more clearly in reading and express yourself with greater power in writing or speaking.
It really highlights how every word choice matters, doesn't it? Especially when talking about complex human actions, relationships, character. The dictionary, in breaking down these synonyms, isn't just providing alternative.
No, not at all.
It's giving us a map of how we think and talk about complex ideas, how we categorize types of surrender, levels of contempt, forms of appropriation, degrees of deception, kinds of aggression,
Patterns of connection.
varieties of social ease, and methods of awareness.
Understanding these nuances empowers you. As a reader, a listener, a communicator, It allows you to grasp the precise meaning someone intends, to recognize subtle biases or implications, perhaps,
Good point.
and to choose the perfect word to convey your own thoughts with clarity and impact, avoiding misinterpretation and adding richness to your expression. It's a shortcut, like we said, to being well-informed, not just about facts, but about the very language we use to make sense of
Well,
facts.
you might think a dictionary is just, a list of words. But this deep dive shows it's really a treasury of human experience and conceptual categorization, cataloged and defined. The subtle shifts in meaning between synonyms tell us so much about the different ways we perceive the world and the intricate distinctions we make in describing it.
It makes you wonder, doesn't it? If just the first few letters of the alphabet contain this much nuanced understanding, this much detail about human behavior, interaction, perception, what incredible richness and complexity is waiting in the rest of the dictionary?
Yeah.
What other entire landscapes of meaning are there to explore?
A provocative thought indeed. Something for you to ponder the next time you encounter a word you think you know, but maybe don't quite know the full depth of its meaning relative to its close cousins.
Yeah.
The dictionary is waiting. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks, everyone.
We hope you feel a little more well-informed and perhaps inspired to explore the precise power of language on your own.